My wife cheated on me. I found out when I overheard my coworker boasting to others that he had very rough with my wife. Late one evening, I found myself alone, oblivious to the laughter and curious eyes on me. The source of their amusement wasn't my awkwardness, but a shocking personal revelation that I was the last to discover. They found it especially funny that I was completely unaware of my wife's infidelity. Derek Hall, who claimed to know my wife well, was telling his friend Mark how he had seduced her at a party last week. Meanwhile, I was called to investigate a break-in at a local art gallery. I was gone for about 2 hours and returned before the night was over. When I came back, I found my wife sitting at a table with 3 other people, including Derek Hall and his boss, along with their spouses. My name is Jack Mason, and I'm an insurance investigator for a well-known company that deals with high-value property clients. This profession might be unfamiliar to most, but I've been in it since I graduated from college over 15 years ago. At 37, I consider myself in the prime of my life. My job involves investigating incidents that might lead to substantial compensation claims, mainly thefts and robberies, and sometimes car accidents involving multiple vehicles. I'm very good at what I do and have built a solid reputation in my industry. I'm often contracted out to other companies for a premium. Although I travel frequently, it's never for long periods. If a lengthy investigation is required, I have a team that can stay on site to finish the job. I've been married to Mia for 14 years, and we have 2 wonderful children, Emma, age 10, and Lily, age 8. Mia, who's a year older than me, also works at the same company as the personal secretary to John Parker, the company president. We got married before she joined the company, but I encouraged her to apply for a position after she lost her previous job. Although hiring her needed HR approval due to nepotism policies, they agreed because of my standing within the company. Fortunately, John Parker was looking for a new secretary, and Mia's extensive experience as a personal assistant at a major corporation made her a perfect fit. After the interview, he offered her the job on the spot. Derek Hall and Mark Johnson, the people I mentioned earlier, are insurance specialists who deal with large companies or wealthy individuals. While we're not close friends, they work under David Thompson, a mutual acquaintance and a good friend of mine. I report primarily to John Parker and work independently, though sometimes David gives me interesting assignments. A week after the party, I overheard a disturbing conversation. I had stepped into the restroom to take a break when Derek and Mark walked in, seemingly ignoring the closed stall door, and started talking about the party. Derek began bragging to Mark about his recent conquest, making me feel a growing discomfort in my gut, something far worse than food poisoning. Mark asked Derek how he managed to seduce her, surprised because he never saw her as that type of woman. Derek said they danced a bit, and she seemed friendly. When he suggested going to his office, she mentioned that Jack wouldn't like it, but he convinced her to join him for a drink at the bar. Derek continued describing how, while Jack was dancing with Mia, he got a double shot from the bartender and subtly swapped their drinks. His aim was to help Mia relax so he could make advances on the dance floor. Mark questioned Derek's plan, given Jack's presence, but Derek claimed he hadn't planned Jack's departure, it was just luck. During the dance, Jack told Mia he needed to step out briefly. Though Mia suggested he take her home first, Jack insisted she stay and have fun, promising a quick return. Mia wasn't thrilled but agreed, staying behind with Derek, David, and his wife. Later, Derek got Mia another drink, secretly asking Max to make it a double again without her noticing. As they danced, Mia became more intoxicated, clinging to Derek as he made his moves. She giggled and pressed against him several times. Derek thought a few more drinks would seal the deal, so he got her another, which she quickly drank. Unbeknownst to her, it was another double, and she started feeling very woozy. Derek suggested they get some fresh air, and Mia agreed. They ended up in the back seat of his car. She was almost unconscious, and he slid his hand under her skirt. She didn't resist, and even begged for more. He complied, and she seemed to enjoy it. Derek found the experience unbelievable. He couldn't believe Mia would behave this way, considering she never seemed like someone who would cheat or be attracted to him. He assured his friend that it all happened, mentioning a date with Mia the following Saturday, when she usually went to the salon. They planned to meet and book a hotel room for the day. Mark, envious, acknowledged Mia's attractiveness and wondered what Jack did to deserve her. He even hinted at meeting Mia after Derek was done with her. Derek gave a non-committal maybe and stressed the need for secrecy to avoid any issues. They left the restroom, leaving me grappling with what I had just heard. Could this really be happening? I started recalling that night. It was almost 11 p.m. when I returned to the party, finding Mia seated with Derek, Julie, and David Thompson. Mia didn't seem drunk when I joined them. She was chatting with Julie about the kids. Derek exchanged a few words with me but left shortly after. I noticed Mia whispering something to him, but I didn't think much of it. The only odd thing about that night was when we got home, Mia wanted to make love. While not entirely out of the ordinary, it struck me as odd given the circumstances. She typically wasn't in the mood this late at night, but she was particularly passionate that evening, almost like she was driven by guilt or regret. About a week passed after the party, and I noticed no change in Mia's demeanor. She never mentioned my early departure from the party or what happened in my absence. When I asked, she claimed she danced with Derek and David, but mostly observed. She said she and Julie talked about school and the kids' activities, and that was it. She even suggested she would have preferred to come home when I left, implying I needed to keep a closer eye on her. "Do you have any plans for this Saturday?" "I was thinking of playing golf if that's all right," I asked, watching her closely for her reaction. "This Saturday, right after lunch? I'll be at the salon. It'll take me an hour, maybe an hour and a half." "Where are you heading?" she replied, seemingly casual. "To the golf course," I answered, feeling a knot in my stomach. How did Derek know about her plans if she hadn't told him? I hadn't known about it either. It all felt uncomfortably real. "I'm thinking the country club. Maybe I'll see if Mark Johnson wants to join. He and David are usually up for a game," I continued, probing for more clues. "Don't you think Mark and David are idiots?" she replied, her tone dismissive. "I'm not sure. I know David is, but I don't know Mark or his wife well enough to say," I answered, trying to keep the conversation neutral. "What about Derek Hall? You talked to him at the party, right?" "Maybe he'd like to come along," I suggested, watching her reaction closely. Mia turned and gave me an odd look, pausing before responding. "Why would you want him to come? He's an idiot. I had to dance with him a few times at the party, and he really creeped me out. He's still an idiot." Now I was wondering if she was trying to dissuade me from inviting him or convincing me she disliked him. Either way, it was unusual for her to speak about someone like that. "Oh, I don't know much about him, but he's Mark's friend, and they seem close. Maybe it's not a good idea. I'll just call Sam and Owen. They're always up for a round," I replied, backing off the topic. "That sounds like a better plan. Stay away from Derek. You don't want any trouble," she said, seemingly relieved. "All right, he's off my list now." "So you're okay with golf?" I asked. "I'm fine with it, as long as I'll still be at the salon. How about dinner at the Cypress Inn afterward? I'll have a fresh haircut, and you can unwind after golf. You can take me out and show me off." "I'll drop Emma and Lily off at my parents'," she suggested. I agreed, and we arranged to meet at home at 5:30 on Saturday to prepare. If I'd been more cautious, I could have gathered enough evidence to confront her that day. It would have been fitting to lay it all out over dinner at one of the city's finest spots. The next day at work, I headed to the control room to gather some gear for tracking my wife and her lover. I decided to take one of the company's surveillance vans, leaving it in the lot until Saturday morning when I went golfing. I grabbed 2 small transmitters for her purse and car, and a GPS unit for her vehicle. It would pinpoint her exact location at any time. The van was equipped with video capabilities, but I wasn't sure how to utilize it since Derek mentioned a motel. Filming was out of the question. Perhaps I could conceal a camera in her jacket, but only if I knew she'd wear it. I could try, but it was uncertain. With the GPS unit, I could track her movements, tapping into its signal with the van's equipment. It had local street maps, pinpointing her location within 30 meters. The audio transmitters would capture any conversations recorded within the van. All of this could be automated, so I didn't even need to be present in the van. I just needed to leave it about a mile away from where she was last week. My plan was to spend the rest of the week observing. I'm quite skilled at this since it's my profession. I observed Mark and Derek but didn't notice anything unusual. Normally I visit my wife at least once a day, but lately I've been visiting a bit more frequently. Although I hadn't seen anything suspicious yet, I decided to gather information from Mark. He explained that he was working on policies for a large factory complex, and I used to spend some time examining the site and developing contingency plans for potential disasters. This is known as risk analysis and is part of the risk insurance process. On a particular Tuesday, I approached his desk, which was across from Derek. He seemed deeply engrossed in his work. I greeted him and expressed my desire to review the Baxter plant plan for the day. Initially, he appeared distracted until he understood my request, after which he simply nodded and agreed, stating he was available anytime. I still needed to return to that location to take some photos. We discussed the timing, agreeing to go in about an hour. It was decided that my colleague would stop by my desk on their way. After a brief exchange, I turned the corner and noticed a smirk exchanged between Mark and Derek. They maintained their gaze on me until I was out of sight. They were intriguing individuals. I resolved that Mark would face consequences for his actions. Although he wasn't directly involved, he colluded with Derek and made disparaging remarks about my wife. He was aware of the plan and chose to witness Derek's deception, rendering him equally responsible in my perspective. An hour later, Mark arrived as arranged and we departed in my SUV. I discreetly installed one of the small transmitters in the car console, which could record any conversation within or near the vehicle. My intention was to have a record of our private conversation. As we left the parking lot and began the 25-minute journey to Baxter, I started the conversation. "So, Mark, did you enjoy the party last week?" I asked, trying to ease into the topic. "I wasn't there. I was away on a trip and missed out on the festivities," he responded. I conveyed to Mark my interest in understanding what had caught his attention, particularly in light of Derek's betrayal involving my wife. I asked if that was what he had overlooked. Mark seemed taken aback by my straightforwardness and initially struggled to respond. He made a move towards the door handle, but then composed himself and met my gaze. "I only know what Derek told me. I'm not sure if it's all true," he confessed, doubting the accuracy of the information. "Do you really think Derek would make up such a story?" I pressed, skeptical. Mark pondered this and then shrugged. "It's hard to say, but why would he lie about something like that? I overheard him talking about getting her drunk and taking her to his car. How did you know about it if you weren't there?" I questioned further, pushing for more details. Mark looked uncomfortable but finally said, "Derek told me about it afterward. He mentioned your 2-hour absence coinciding with the incidents." I nodded, noting the information. This was just the beginning. I needed to dig deeper and find out the truth. Derek didn't seem to have any further plans beyond what he had already disclosed. Mark, hesitant and unsure of the truthfulness of Derek's story, recounted his words. I sarcastically commented on Mark's loyalty and thanked him for his so-called friendship, hinting that he should have told me regardless of his intentions. Mark expressed reluctance, saying he wouldn't wish such a situation on anyone, and apologized for making me feel like a fool. He mentioned Derek's claim that he couldn't resist my wife. After Derek's statement, I switched off the recorder, intending to keep our next conversation off the record. I reassured Mark that if he followed my instructions, he'd be fine, but warned him of serious consequences if he failed. Mark nodded in agreement, clearly uneasy. I then hinted at another matter to discuss with him. I made it clear that Derek must remain unaware of our conversation and that Mark must not disclose anything to him. I stressed the severe consequences of any breach of trust, including losing his job and tarnishing his reputation. I reminded him that I had ways of monitoring both him and Derek to catch any slip-ups. I assured Mark that I wouldn't confront Derek or interact with him, instructing Mark to continue as usual and let Derek do the talking without interference. With the truth in hand, I instructed Mark to heed my warnings, assuring him everything would be fine if he followed my instructions. After that, we barely spoke, spending the next 2 hours in silence. Mark did his job, and I did mine, getting the information I needed while keeping Mark in the dark about my plans. It wasn't necessary for him to know everything just yet. The week dragged on with me keeping a close watch on Mia. Although she didn't show any suspicious behavior, I remained vigilant. Wednesday evening came, and the kids went to their dance class, which ended around 9:30. I sat in the living room watching TV when Mia joined me, settling onto my lap. She wrapped her arms around my neck, pressing her cheek against mine. "We've got about 2 hours before I need to pick up the kids. How about we make love?" she suggested, her voice a mix of seduction and urgency. Despite my anger and frustration over the situation, I was still human. Against my better judgment, I felt myself getting aroused. I held her tightly, kissing her passionately. "Take me upstairs to our bedroom right now. I want you, and I want it now," she whispered urgently. Without another word, I followed her upstairs, admiring her figure. We undressed and then engaged in intense, passionate lovemaking. Afterwards, we lay in each other's arms, basking in the afterglow. For a moment, I pushed aside my doubts and fears that everything would come crashing down. I wanted to believe it was all a lie, but reality had a way of creeping back in. That was amazing, darling. We need to do this more often, don't you think? We've been out of sync lately. Let's not let that happen again, she said, her voice soft and content. Agreed. I'll make sure of it. How much time do we have? Do we have time for a quick shower, I asked, trying to keep the mood light. I have to pick up the kids after 9, but we can delay it if you want. Now, or should we wait until our date on Saturday night? I could ask the kids to stay at their grandma's for the night, she suggested. How about this? I'm all yours for the evening. Anything else planned for Saturday, I inquired. Okay, you've got golf, and I've got a hair appointment. Then we have our dinner date, and afterward, I'm all yours. Whenever you want, however you want, and I expect plenty of that from you. Any better offers now, she teased. None at all, I replied, smiling. Okay, then we're set, she said, quickly dressing and heading out to fetch the children. I lay there for a while, reflecting on what had just happened. How could she be so affectionate and intimate with me if she was involved with someone like Derek Hall? I knew she was clever, but was she also a skilled actress? Something didn't add up, and I was determined to find out the truth. On Saturday, while she was out, I checked the transmitters and confirmed they were working. My plan was to install them in her car on Friday night and in her purse. I had everything ready except for one last meeting with Mark Johnson. I needed to know which hotel Derek had reserved. Mark would get that information for me, or I'd have to resort to more drastic measures. The following morning, I called Mark and arranged to meet him in the third-floor cafeteria. He agreed without hesitation. When he arrived, I was already seated at a table. He joined me silently and I got straight to the point. Mark, I need you to find out from Derek where he's planning to take Mia on Saturday. I need the motel's name and location. Catch him alone and ask him. Tell him you suspect he's deceiving you and that you'll trust him if he tells you the truth, I instructed, my tone leaving no room for argument. Mark hesitated, the fear of my reprisal evident in his eyes. Eventually, he agreed, but asked how I'd verify if he was telling the truth. I assured him not to worry, I had my ways. As he left, I discreetly placed one of the transmitters under his jacket collar. He was so nervous, he didn't notice a thing. Back in my office, I activated the receiver and heard Mark return to his desk and start talking to Derek. Mark invited Derek to meet him in the copy room in 10 minutes, to which Derek agreed. Mark then questioned Derek about potential marital issues. Derek defensively claimed everything was fine and mentioned seeing me the day before, seemingly doing well. Unsatisfied, Mark pressed him about his plans with my wife for Saturday, specifically mentioning a motel. Derek, insistent on his truthfulness, offered proof if needed. He revealed that he had booked a room at the Skyview Motel on Statler Street for Saturday night, with check-in at 2 p.m., and my wife arriving by 2:15 p.m. He even suggested calling the motel to confirm. After confirming the details, Derek made a disparaging remark about my marriage and warned Mark not to meddle in their affair. Despite Mark's apparent concern, he nodded in agreement, clearly shaken. Derek remained indifferent, suggesting that if my wife was interested, so was he. After hearing this exchange, I turned off the receiver, feeling a mix of disbelief and anger. I had hoped Derek would admit to lying, but instead he confirmed everything, leaving me unsettled. Now, with the motel address in hand, I planned to set up surveillance equipment in the van. My mind raced with ideas. I could park the van there on Friday night, activate the gear on Saturday at noon, and keep my distance to avoid witnessing my wife's betrayal firsthand. The only thing I could do now was gather concrete evidence to confront Mia, Derek, and Mark. My first move was to call the motel. They confirmed Derek's booking, at least that part was true. With that confirmation, I had to bide my time until Friday evening. Then, an idea struck me. What if I captured them entering the motel room on camera? I decided to visit the motel that day and scout the area. Inside the Skyview Motel office, I waited for the clerk, a shady-looking character, which suited my purposes perfectly. Honesty wasn't what I needed right now. Hello, friend. I'm an investigator for an insurance company, and I need some information. Here's my ID and a warrant, I said, flashing my badge and presenting a convincing, albeit fake, document. The slip of cash I handed him didn't hurt either. "Sure, what do you need?" he replied, his eyes lighting up at the sight of the money. "I need to confirm Derek Hall's reservation and get a room number," I said. He checked his records and shook his head. "No room assigned yet." "How about you assign a room on the first floor overlooking Statler Street?" I suggested, slipping him another 50. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded and gave me a room number that was perfect for my needs. I informed him about the van he'd be parking on his property, to which he shrugged indifferently. I thanked him again and slipped him another 50 for his discretion. His sly grin as he pocketed the cash told me he'd keep quiet. As I left, it dawned on me that I could capture the footage I needed by positioning the camera through the front window of the van parked directly outside their room. My plan was set. Friday at work was challenging, my mind was elsewhere. To distract myself, I headed to John Parker's office using the excuse of discussing a recent art gallery robbery. Although the details weren't urgent, my real motive was to catch a glimpse of Mia. As I walked through the hallway, her face brightened upon seeing me, and she waved me over to her table. "I've been seeing more of you lately. Not complaining, but what's changed? Anything I should know about?" she asked, a playful smile on her face. "Nothing much, just enjoying being around you more," I replied. "Is John in?" "He is. Want me to introduce you?" she offered. "Yes, if possible. I need to discuss some matters regarding the art gallery," I explained. Entering John's office, I engaged in conversation. Despite his youth, John had earned a strong reputation. He had spearheaded various ventures, including the site I worked on, and held a substantial stake in the company. His wife, Sarah, whom he'd met on several occasions, epitomized the trophy wife, blonde, slender, and stunningly attractive. She and Mia were of similar ages and often chatted, while John and I had developed a close rapport. During our discussion, I directly asked John about Derek Hall. As part of my duties, I regularly provided feedback on other employees' performance, though this inquiry was personal. "Why the interest in Derek?" "Is there something I should know?" John asked, curious. "I need to ensure any potential issues with my team are addressed promptly," I replied. "Well, I do have some concerns about Derek. I'm not particularly fond of him or Mark. I might have more to share this weekend if things go as anticipated. How about we touch base at my place on Sunday? If not, we'll reconvene on Monday," John suggested. "Let's wait and see. Please keep this between us," I requested. "Agreed. I trust your judgment. You've always been fair in your evaluations. By the way, I'd like you to reconsider the vice president position I proposed. I haven't discussed it with Mia yet, but she deserves to know. If you don't inform her soon, I will," John stated firmly. "I'm waiting for the right moment. This entails significant changes for us, so I needed time to deliberate." "I'll give you an update next week," I replied. "Sounds good. Think it over. Weigh your options." "We'll talk soon," John said as we concluded our conversation. Leaving John's office, I exchanged a few words with Mia before heading toward Mark. Pausing at his desk, I made a loud comment about Baxter's performance, ensuring Derek overheard. I then subtly signaled to Mark that I knew about his conversation with Derek, which surprised him. Though neither of us spoke further, I patted him on the back and discreetly removed the small transmitter, leaving him unaware. Wrapping up the day without interruptions, I waited for Mia before heading home. I planned to tell her I needed to drop off the van and would be a bit delayed. She kissed me goodbye and left. I noticed Derek standing by the door watching her leave. He glanced at me briefly before returning to his seat. Afterwards, I parked the van and ensured the camera was correctly positioned to capture the room the clerk had assigned. I secured it and reminded the motel owner to let it stay there overnight, perhaps until the next day, slipping him an extra 20. I thanked him for his cooperation. He pocketed the money and shook my hand, sealing our deal. Returning home, Friday night brought an unexpected twist. Mia had ordered pizza for the kids and arranged for them to spend the evening at Grandma's. When I asked her why, Mia explained that she had enjoyed our Wednesday night so much that she wanted to continue the trend. Did I mind? Not at all. As Friday night unfolded similarly to Wednesday, a gnawing feeling took hold of me. Despite enjoying the experience, I couldn't shake off the unease. Where had she learned these new techniques? Later, when I asked her about it, she giggled, reached over to her nightstand and handed me a book. It was an article about lovemaking after 35. The pages contained many of the things we had done the past 2 nights. I found pleasure in our activities that night, striving to fulfill her desires, even though the entire situation felt surreal. We spent most of the night entwined, and I made a mental note to get some Viagra for future encounters. As we lay beside each other, I finally gathered the courage to ask about her newfound enthusiasm. Mia, I love what we've been doing, and I want to make you happy, but I need to ask, where is all this coming from? Why now? If I didn't trust you so much, I might think there's a guilty conscience at play. Sorry, Jack. Sarah shared something with me last week that I can't repeat. It got me thinking about our life together, and it made me so happy. Sometimes I just need to express that joy. I wanted to show you how much you mean to me, she said, her eyes shining with sincerity. I listened, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. If this was true, how could she be having an affair? Should I confront her now? I'm glad you feel that way. Are you sure I make you happy enough? Are you satisfied with our closeness? Or do you feel something is missing? Please be honest, I urged. I adore our closeness, and you've always made me feel complete. I don't want more. I just don't want our passion to fade into routine. Can't you see? Don't you want me to always feel desired by you? She asked earnestly. You'll never have to worry about that. I love you and always will. I can't imagine anything jeopardizing what we have, I reassured her. That's good to hear because I won't let anything come between us, she replied, snuggling closer. We spent the rest of the night wrapped in each other's arms, waking up the same way. Though pleasantly exhausted, I wanted to shower with Mia, so I woke her and pulled her into the shower with me. Initially protesting, she eventually joined me under the warm spray, and we tenderly attended to each other's needs. Soon our passion ignited again, and we pleasured each other. Afterwards, she mentioned she was ready for the day, but anticipated something more that night. With that, we finished our shower, got dressed early, and I drove to the motel to finalize my preparations. I programmed all the timers to activate at 1 p.m. and ensured the audio recording would last at least 5 hours. The video footage would be burned onto a DVD, a process that would take around 7 hours after compression, covering the entire day. I initiated the sequences and locked up the van. When these two entered their little sanctuary, they'd become the stars of my new film, and the initial screening would be unforgettable. Returning home to grab my golf clubs and bid Mia farewell, the day turned out to be a disaster. I played golf with 2 acquaintances from the club, and my performance was abysmal. By the end, I felt like a complete failure, buying beers for everyone. Around 5, I drove to the van to ensure everything was in order. Scanning the area, I saw no cars or activity, assuming everyone had left. Quickly calling home, Mia answered, and I told her I was on my way. As the time to meet Mia drew near, I drove home without reviewing the surveillance data. I wanted to confront her with the evidence before dinner, but decided to savor our evening together one last time. Despite the betrayal, I still enjoyed making love to her. However, the thought of losing her made me choke up. Why was she doing this to me? I loved her deeply, and the thought of life without her seemed unbearable. If the evidence confirmed my suspicions, divorce was inevitable. Her behavior was unacceptable. But what about our children? She was a devoted mother and deserved custody. If she had indeed cheated, there must be a reason I didn't know. She was fundamentally good, but had made a grave mistake. I could come to terms with that. She could care for the children, and I would provide child support. These thoughts consumed me as I drove home to reunite with Mia, uncertain if I could endure the evening. Legal action couldn't proceed until I had concrete evidence, yet doubt lingered in the back of my mind. I brushed it aside, facts were facts, and soon I'd have all the evidence I needed. At home, Mia had already showered and dressed, mentioning she'd add the finishing touches when it was time to leave. Meanwhile, I hurried to get ready, ensuring we left on time for our reservation. My wife was radiant, always drawing attention as we entered the room. She brushed off the admiring glances from men effortlessly, but I couldn't help noticing, always filled with pride. Tonight was a stark reminder of what could have transpired. Despite everything, she remained intelligent and engaging, making her an excellent dinner companion. We conversed on various topics typical of a night out, and she indulged in more wine than usual. As the designated driver, I noticed her being particularly flirtatious with me. As we concluded our dessert of chocolate mousse and sorbet, we exchanged smiles, both eager to retire to the bedroom. Upon returning home, I signaled the waiter for the bill as Mia excused herself to the restroom. Exiting hand in hand, we made our way to the car. As I navigated the main street toward our house, Mia leaned against my shoulder, intertwining our fingers. She gently moved my hand from the steering wheel to my lap, and without much prompting, I hugged her tightly, reminiscent of our youthful love. She sighed contentedly, and we drove home in a tender embrace. Once home, Mia busied herself with household tasks, her energy seemingly endless. Finally, she turned to me, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Shouldn't we head upstairs and pick up where we left off this morning? You owe me, remember?" she teased. "Absolutely. Lead the way," I replied, trying to match her enthusiasm despite the turmoil inside me. We ascended the stairs quickly, anticipation building. Mia stood before the bed, her eyes locked on mine as I stripped down to my boxers and socks. She removed her top and bra, leaving only a strand of pearls around her neck. As she reached to remove them, I stopped her. "Leave them on. You look incredible with just those pearls. This is a sight only I get to see. I'm completely yours tonight," I said, trying to immerse myself in the moment. "I'm all yours," she whispered, her voice filled with a mix of seduction and sincerity. In that moment, I wanted to believe her despite everything. I decided to put aside my doubts and focus on the present. We explored new realms of intimacy, trying positions and experiences that were new to us. She laughed and referenced page numbers from her book whenever I inquired about her fantasies. It was a night of discovery and connection, one that felt almost surreal in its intensity. We fell asleep entwined, waking late on Sunday morning, reluctant to part. She agreed to one more encore of our favorite moments from the night before. Afterwards, she had to pick up the girls, and I mentioned needing to check on the van. She suggested staying at her mom's for a while, giving me the perfect opportunity to retrieve the tapes from the van and review their contents. Once she left, I drove to the van, retrieved all the recordings, and returned the van to the production facility. I called a taxi to pick me up and take me back to my car, then headed home. The first thing I did was examine the GPS printout. It confirmed her car's location at the motel on Statler Street. My heart sank. The confirmation of my worst fears hit me hard. I felt compelled to view the video firsthand. I switched on the TV and DVD player, inserting the DVD and preparing myself for the inevitable heartbreak. The image was crystal clear, the room perfectly centered on the screen. I fast-forwarded until I saw a car approaching, then slowed to normal speed. Derek Hall emerged from the car, opened the room's door, and disappeared inside. Rewinding, another car appeared, and I saw a woman knocking on the door and being greeted by Derek's smile as she entered the room. When she turned, revealing her face, my heart raced and my pulse skyrocketed. Pausing the video, I watched it from start to finish before removing it. "Well, I'll be damned," I muttered. I needed to contact John Parker immediately. There was one address I had to verify, so I retrieved my wife's address book from my desk drawer. As expected, the address I sought was there, confirming my suspicions. A determined smile crept onto my face. With all the necessary information in hand, I dialed John's home number, urging him to meet me immediately. He initially insisted I come to his house, but I persuaded him to meet me alone elsewhere. Eventually, we agreed to rendezvous at the TGIF restaurant near the office. An hour later, we met there. Mia and the girls had plans for dinner at her mom's, giving me the time I needed. At TGIF, I briefed John before revealing the DVD. I brought along a portable player with a 9-inch screen and headphones for privacy. As he watched, his anger simmered beneath the surface. Initially skeptical, he vehemently denied the possibility of Mia's involvement. However, as I played the recording of Mark's encounter with Derek and laid out the entire narrative implicating both Mark and Derek, John's complexion turned crimson with rage. Despite his personal regard for Mia, he gradually accepted the truth. I advised him to watch the DVD before passing further judgment. As John viewed the footage, his expression shifted from disbelief to pain. Sensing his need for privacy, I looked away, allowing him to process what he had seen. When he finished, he met my gaze, waiting for my response. Once composed, I made my request. I want them both terminated for breaching the moral clause in their contracts effective by Monday afternoon. With the evidence I've provided, you have the authority to act as you see fit. I won't mention this again, I stated firmly. John's surprise gave way to a resolute nod. You have my word. This will be handled first thing Monday, and he'll personally escort them off the premises. They're dead to me. There may be further action I'll take, but it's best you don't know the details. Understood? Agreed, I replied. Following that, I handed him a bag containing all the surveillance data, except for one small cassette, which I kept for my own purposes. It was necessary for my plans regarding my wife. John and I continued our discussion for another hour or so, making additional decisions to address later in the week. We parted ways with a handshake, and before I left, John addressed me once more. Jack, you've handled this with a level of integrity and composure that's admirable. I appreciate your efforts and respect your actions. Things could have escalated if you hadn't been so level-headed. You have my gratitude and respect, he said. I felt a sense of relief as I headed home to my family, who remained unaware of the impending changes. That evening at home went smoothly, and my spirits were high. Mia was curious about what had transpired, but I told her she'd learn more at work the next day. Exhausted from the previous nights, we retired early for a peaceful night's sleep. Mia wanted to be embraced, and I gladly obliged. We fell asleep in each other's arms, just like the previous night. Monday morning arrived, bustling with activity at work. At 9:30, Mia called me, her voice tinged with urgency. You won't believe what's happening. John has summoned Mark Johnson and Derek Hall to his office. They're in there now, and tensions are high. Feigning cluelessness, I asked, What's going on? John is furious. He's called security, she whispered before hanging up, promising to update me later. 20 minutes passed and Mia called again. John had security escort Mark and Derek out of the building. They're fired. He wants me to draft their termination letters citing a breach of the morals clause, she said, her voice a mix of exhilaration and disbelief. This is the most unusual event I've ever witnessed as John's secretary. We need to talk over lunch. We met for lunch, and Mia recounted the morning's events in detail. She described how security had marched Mark and Derek out, warning them never to return. She mentioned John's agitation, even recounting a moment when he snapped at her before quickly apologizing. Eventually, she turned to me, seeking insight. How would I know about this? I said, feigning ignorance. John told me to ask you. When I pressed him, he just said, Ask Jack. He knows everything and opened my eyes to a lot. So spill it, she insisted. Before I say anything, listen to this tape. I handed her a cassette of Mark and Derek's conversation about the motel. She listened, her expression turning pale as she reached the end. Removing her headphones, she exclaimed indignantly, This is absurd. It's a lie. I never went to any motel with him and never would. You can't trust this recording. Did you show this to John? Does he believe this nonsense too? No, he doesn't believe Derek, and neither do I said, calming her slightly. But I have something to explain, and I need you to listen without interrupting. Mia nodded, still visibly shaken. I overheard Mark and Derek talking about a week ago. Derek boasted to Mark about an encounter with you at a party, claiming he got you intoxicated and took you to his car. He provided explicit details, and Mark seemed convinced. In fact, Mark was so impressed, he wanted in on the next rendezvous, I explained. I needed to know the truth, so I instructed Mark to confront Derek, who admitted to booking a motel room on Statler Street for Saturday afternoon during your hair appointment. That raised alarms. How did he know about your appointment unless you told him? I never told him, she protested. I was at the salon, like I said. My salon is on Statler Street, but I had no idea about any motel rendezvous. You don't believe me? I do believe you, Mia, I reassured her, but I had to verify everything. I used a company surveillance van to monitor your car and record anyone entering the motel room. I viewed the footage on Sunday. A woman did visit Derek, but it wasn't you. Who was it? She asked, bewildered. It was Sarah, John's wife, I revealed. I suspected something was off after talking to David Thompson. He said you and his wife only drank soft drinks at the party and stayed together the whole night, even asking her to stay by your side to deter Derek. I realized Derek was diverting attention from his true companion. Mia's eyes widened in shock. So did you really doubt me? Did you set up surveillance to spy on me? I had to be sure, Mia. Derek's lies created doubt, but I never doubted your integrity. I needed to uncover the truth, and unfortunately, it implicated John's wife. He was devastated when I told him. We talked further, I said. Reluctantly returning to work, Mia accepted my explanation, though she was hurt by the surveillance. I felt no regret for uncovering the truth. Our relationship was now stable, and I was determined to keep it that way. The rest of the day was a blur of normalcy, until Mia informed me that John wanted to speak with her that evening. She seemed to believe my feigned ignorance. During dinner, amidst the usual chaos with the girls, Mia found a moment to share her conversation with John. He talked about the importance of trust, respect, and love in a marriage, and the devastation of losing it all. Then he confided in me about Sarah's actions and asked for my advice. "What did you tell him?" I asked, intrigued. I encouraged him to reflect on his love for Sarah and consider forgiveness if possible. I urged him to have a candid conversation with her, but cautioned against prolonging the decision if reconciliation seemed unlikely. He seemed receptive, she explained. "Did he mention anything about me?" I inquired. "No, nothing specific." "Why?" she asked, sensing more. "Well, yes. John extended an offer for me to become vice president of investigations. It involves overseeing all investigators globally and offers substantial financial rewards and benefits, including shares. We could choose to live in California or Florida, though I'd still report to John," I revealed. Mia's excitement was palpable. She leaped into my arms, overwhelmed with joy. "When did this happen? Is this in recognition of your actions today?" "Actually, he proposed this 6 months ago. I wasn't ready to consider it until now. The thought of losing everything made the decision more tangible. Last week, I feared I might lose you, and it prompted me to reevaluate," I explained. "Jack, you could never lose me like that. I won't stray ever. It's out of the question. Do you understand?" she affirmed, holding me tightly. We held each other, the weight of the past week lifting. Our future seemed clearer now, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Exhausted from the emotional roller coaster, we retired early, falling into a deep, peaceful sleep, ready to face whatever came next together.